this works? Yeah, it does. All right. So 2019, I wrote a book about the future of work. It was called Career Fear and How to Beat It. And when I was writing this book, obviously I didn't know that the pandemic was going to happen. So then in 2020, when the pandemic happened, I was like, at that time the book wasn't published yet. So I had finished it and we were going through the publication, with my publisher. And I suddenly, when the pandemic happened, I suddenly realized that everything that I had talked about in the book that was going to be happening in the next 5 to 15 years is actually going to happen within the next 1 to 5 years. So I always make the same comparison when you think about, going from Web 1 to Web 2, now going into Web 3. And if you think of like the Web 2 era has taken about 20 years for social media to get to where it has gotten. Now Web 3 is going to be around 5 years, and we have already gone into that. And AI and automation is going to be a big, big part of it. So one thing that I have always been really focused on is this concept of transition. I come from Iran originally, and I grew up during the Iran-Iraq War. One thing that I learned very early was this idea of not being attached to anything and being open to exploring new possibilities. So the stuff that I learned from my personal journey on how to adapt constantly and be comfortable with constant transition really applies to where we are going in our journey with technology. And that's what I want to talk to you about. So in order to adapt to this new era of technological advancement, and as we are going towards this technological singularity, and what that means by the singularity, what do we mean by that, is basically the point where artificial intelligence could potentially surpass our intelligence, and we don't know what the world is going to look like before, after that, right? So we need to start preparing for that time. And if you think about when that time is going to be, like what is the timeline for it, that timeline has been pushed forward with because of the pandemic, right? So right now, I don't know how many of you know the book The Singularity is Near by Ray Kurzweil. So he wrote that book, like over a decade ago, and now he's writing a new book that is coming out next year, and it's called The Singularity is Nearer, right? So what we want to prepare for is this era of constant evolution, right? So what we want to be, what we want to become, we just heard earlier that we want to become teachers to the AI, right? So another way of thinking about it is that we are the architects of this transition. So this is so much more interesting. Like, as we heard earlier, that we used to be the doer, but now we want to be the architects of this new world that we are going into. And it's so much more interesting. It makes work so much more interesting, and that's what we want to do, to create a new way of being and a new way of working and a new experience for our team members, right? So this is okay. So one thing that we need to get our head around is this concept of speed. The speed of change is incredibly fast, and is constantly increasing. Just to give you a little bit of a big picture kind of transition, what it looks like, if you think about from ancient history, like how long it took to get from early tool making to the fueling mill. That was in 12th century, right? And then from there, it was like much less time to get to the first industrial revolution. Then from the first industrial revolution to the second, it got shorter. From the second to the third, it got shorter. And now it's almost going into this exponential age. I think that for us as humans, it's quite difficult to get our head around this concept of exponential growth or exponential speed. But it's going to happen, and it is already happening before you even know it. So in the past, if it took, like I said, about 15, 20 years to go from Web 2 to Web 3, for example, now it's going to take much, much less time. So when the pandemic happened, I remember I was reading in The Economist that there were certain AI and automation plans in Chinese companies, in Chinese factories, that were planned for the next 5 years, and now they were going to be implementing them within 1 year. Because now everybody's realizing, after the pandemic especially, that you really need to have much more integrated technological advancements within your company and like be prepared for everything. But the thing about bringing in more technology is that then we need technology and humans to have adaptability between each other. One of the problems with technology so far is that it has been all about, when you think about like machine learning, right now, where we're going from actually telling AI what to do, or from if this then that, to a much more intelligent way of developing these technologies and artificial intelligence. But that requires humans and technology to work together. And now the new work environment is all about facilitating that. So it's less about being this kind of prescriptive way of this is what you need to do, these are your tasks, and more like facilitating for AI and humans to work together and be adaptable. So we need to just get comfortable with the speed of technological advancement, and we need to be open to integrate them into our work environments. One of the things that I always give, like there's this analogy that might help with when I'm talking about how we need to integrate technology, is that, if you think about it, in the past, we used to think of our work identities as more like a foundation, right? You would learn something, and then you would go and you do that for years. So it was more like, you could think of it more like a building. So you built a foundation for that building, and then you lived in that building for a long time. Now we have to think of it as more like a tent, right? So it's no longer that we are building that kind of like a building. We are now living in a tent, and we need to be ready to constantly pack that down and then get up and go to the next goalpost. And then pack that down again and go to the next one. So this idea of living in a tent, at first it might feel like, for a lot of people it's like, look, I don't want to live in a tent, because they like that idea of, having that foundation. But you have to think of this, technology is almost like a life form in itself. It's not going to wait for us. So we have to adapt to it. It's like, it's the more you resist it, the harder it becomes. But the more you lean into it and you accept that technology is moving so fast and we need to be able to adapt to it, the easier it becomes and the more enjoyable it becomes as well. And I've seen it in my own team constantly. Every time we are introducing a new automation tool, everybody starts to kind of panic in the beginning, and they think that they're going to lose their work. But we reassure them, and we tell them that actually we are going to give you something more interesting to do. So we make them feel comfortable with that change. So so when we think about a tent, what are the kind of characteristics of a tent or living in a tent? It's about being mobile, it's about being flexible, it's about being agile, and it gives you space for reinvention. So as humans that are driving these technological advancements and building this new workplace, it's all about us being open to it. And what does that mean, to be open? It means to have, so a lot of you guys might have heard of this, the idea of that you need to not resist, not judge, so non-judgment, non-resistant, and non-attachment. It's like a Buddhist philosophy, right? I wasn't sure whether to mention that or not, but it is like, I'm not a Buddhist or anything, but this is it's a philosophy that has been there for millennia, and people who understand that, this idea of being, having an open mindset and having that kind of not resisting change and not judging the new landscape. You see, when you go traveling, when you think about when you're traveling, If you go to a new town and you start judging the things that you see and see, like, I don't like this, I don't like that, I don't like their food, I don't like their culture, you just make that experience less enjoyable for yourself. But if you keep an open mind and say, okay, it's just a different landscape, right? So with this new technological changes that we are going into, it's just a new landscape. So at first, the first week, it might be a little bit, weird, different. But very soon, you will get used to it. And then when you get used to it, then you don't want to go to the next one. So this is the idea of inertia, right? So very quickly, we will adapt. And then we don't want to go to the next one. So instead of trying to kind of get settled, we need to constantly remember that actually, it's really enjoyable to experience new scenery, right? And not getting attached to the new conditions. So an open mindset will empower you to be prepared for any outcome. This is important, like we cannot control the outcome. Like, if you talked to me 6 months ago, I wouldn't know where my business was going to be, where it is now. Like nowadays, I was just talking earlier with the gentleman here that nowadays I spend so much of my time in Discord. Honestly, like 9 months ago, when people told me that if you're building a business in Web3, you really have to spend a lot of time on Discord, I was like, no, I don't want to go there. I don't want another social media. I don't want to go into a new environment. We've already got so many of them. But then I realized that actually I need to adapt, right? So it's just being comfortable with the fact that not knowing what the outcome is going to be. But of course, you can, if you partner with the right kind of technological partners, they will be able to help you navigate that journey. So an open mind requires an open technology. It's not just enough to say that, okay, we are going to have an open mind and, and see how this is going to all unfold. It's also about having the right kind of open technologies. So one of the problems with artificial intelligence implementation in many companies so far has been that they work in silos. They come into your company and they don't really adapt to your culture. They don't really adapt to the environment. And most of the time, they want you to replace what you already have. So it creates a lot of friction for the workers. So you want to be finding the right kind of partner that would be able to work with what you already have and enhance that and make that journey easier and more enjoyable for your workers. So it's not just that we need humans that are going to be flexible, we also need AI that is going to be flexible. And we need partners that, technology partners that are going to be able to facilitate that. So arm yourself with the right partner here. And this partner needs to be able to facilitate interoperability, right? So that it means that basically to be able to work with the different systems that you already have and find solutions to be able to connect them with each other and not have to create silos within the workspace so that people feel really frustrated. And I see that all the time. One of our biggest clients is Steinway Pianos. And I see that like every time they've got a new partner coming in, they want them to rip apart everything that they've got and rebuild it. So this is the kind of problem that we are facing whenever we are integrating new technologies. So we need flexibility, both, it has to come from both sides, both from the workforce and also from the technology partners. And they need to be able to have that level of agility to be able to also work with you on making these transitions easier. You want to be able to create space for reinvention. So this concept of reinvention, going back to the transition architecture, it's just like being able to constantly reinvent yourself and being ready to adapt to new landscapes. So one important thing about this is the data, right? And we talked a little bit earlier about that. If you think about, what makes good AI, machine learning, it's all about data. And if you have the possibility of working with with a technology partner that is able to use the data that you already have so that this data is not going to waste, and is able to use that for training and improving your, your workforce, then that's a really big plus. And I know that there are some amazing solutions that Laia have. Okay, so coming to an end, almost like I kind of lost track of time with the little. Just to recap here, as humans, we need to make sure that there are 4 skills that we need to develop so that we are comfortable with this era of constant transition that we're going into. So those human skills are emotional intelligence, critical thinking, contextual creativity, and mindfulness. And when I talk about mindfulness, I mean being present, being actually really connected with the work that we are doing. And actually, that's very hard to do if you're doing a lot of repetitive work. And that's another interesting thing about being able to utilize AI and machine learning in a positive way. So we want to get rid of the type of work that is all about if this, then that, because machines can do that better than us. You know, in the past, we used to program machines, but now we are actually converging with machines, right? So what that means is that our workers are going to be able to go to higher level tasks, and their work is going to be a lot more interesting. So it's really important to communicate this with them in a way that they feel respected, and they feel that they are being valued and doing something more interesting. So just remember that this is not about technological, this is not about digital transformation. So in the past, people kept talking about digital transformation, but it's not about transformation, it's about transition. We need to remember that it's not like we're going to finish something and go into something else and then that's it, let's get comfortable. It's all about transition and being comfortable with it. Is that okay?
Thank you very much, David.
Thank you.
I have one question for you, actually, Somi, whilst we set up the next session. I mean, you've talked a lot about being open and embracing that change. I mean, how do you make people feel comfortable with AI?
Yeah. So the most important thing is to try and talk to them before you implement something, okay, right? And just give them that reassurance that they're not losing their job, because a lot of people like worry about that, and actually say that you're being promoted, because they are, right? Yeah. So it's all about using the right kind of language and say, hey, we are promoting you to a more interesting, more complex task, right?
Makes perfect sense. So it's all about that transition, as you say. Well, listen,
yes,
thank you ever so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.